I'm John Chowney with Campbellsville University, welcoming our audience for Dialogue on Public Issues. We thank you for your words of encouragement and for those that watch us and listen to us on WLCU FM and television. My guest today is Dr. Gary Cox. Dr. Cox is the president of the Association of Independent Kentucky Colleges and Universities, the ICU. You will hear me reference throughout the interview that being the acronym for the association. You might say that Dr. Cox is our chief lobbyist in Frankfort, as well as providing leadership and encouragement for all the 18 members of ICU. Gary, welcome back.
John, delighted to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about ICU and the mission, historic mission of the group.
ICU is about 65 years old, and it started out as two organizations, actually. The initial organization was a fundraising organization, and would have about 75 members on its board. And interestingly enough, private colleges in those days did not raise money from the business community. They only raised money from individuals. And I'm sure the business community today is surprised to hear that. And so they decided to go together, and two or three presidents would go together, and they couldn't go to their own community, they'd go to another community to raise money. And that didn't work very well, actually. People would cancel their meetings and that sort of thing. So, but then about 1970, they developed a policy group. So when I came to ICU way back in late 1997, there was the policy group and the fundraising group. And the presidents had already decided they were going to merge those into ICU. And when two long-term leaders of those organizations retired, they established ICU. Actually, ICU, when I took the position, had no legal standing. There were two 501c3s, the policy group and the fundraising group. We, a few years later, we merged those two, and we continued to, I literally have those two on paper. About 3 years ago, we just simply merged into one 501c3. So we're a 501c3. I don't lobby, I provide information.
Oh, well, okay. All right.
Get
that, let me correct my wording.
Because we're a 501c3. I'm always
You cannot lobby, you can only educate.
That's right. I provide information about our members and issues of importance to us, to the General Assembly, and to other folks in D.C. and other places. And we're one of about 35 states that have an organization like ours. So, we have 18 members, about 40,000, a little over 40,000 students among our 18, Campbellsville and 17 others. We provide generate about 8,000 degrees. It's kind of an interesting couple of watersheds. And I took this position in '97. As you know, I'd been at the Council on Higher Education for about 20 years and director there. As soon as we finished the reform, the post-secondary reform in '97, I came over, and for the next 20 years, Kentucky's commitment was to increase the number of bachelor's degrees, which was right in our wheelhouse. And so that was been very good for our members. Also in 1998, we established the KEYS program and committed all the lottery revenue, we being the Commonwealth of Kentucky, to college students. By our 1891 Constitution, we cannot receive any public money, but our students can.
Right.
And so the scholarship programs, which we might talk about a little bit later, are very, very important to our members. Today, our students receive about $57 million in state student financial aid, which is less than 3% of what the state commits to student aid, or not student aid, to higher education. And so for less than 3% of the state appropriation to post-secondary education, we produce about 20% of the degrees. So that return on investment for the Commonwealth, we think, is pretty substantial. And that's one of those information points I share with people.
Right. Kentucky does not have a dominating private college or university like some states. Indiana has Notre Dame, Tennessee has Vanderbilt, just two neighboring states. But we have 18 very fine private colleges and universities. How would you describe them collectively? What sets them apart, and some of the diversity within that group of 18?
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. Diversity is one of our big issues. We go from about 700 students at our smallest institution to well over 13,000 here at the University of the Cumberlands.
Campbellsville.
No, here I said
Oh,
here
oh,
and then
oh,
at the university.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, you two are the largest, is what I was
Right,
saying.
right.
We have two of the about 6 work colleges in America. Berea, which many people know about, of course, has been in business for a long time, has a large endowment, which they live off of.
Right.
They don't charge any tuition. And then we have Alice Lloyd in the mountains that a lot of people probably don't know in Pippa Passes, Kentucky, which is also a work college, but they raise pretty much their money every year for their students. They don't really have much of an endowment. We have urban institutions, Bellarmine, Spalding, Transylvania, then Georgetown, Midway, Asbury in urban areas. And then we have many, and I think one of our most important aspects for the Commonwealth are the Campbellsvilles that we have in small towns, very great places to live, but bring a nice economic development and quality of life to those areas. I always tell folks, that college faculty are not going to sit by and let their kids go to lousy schools.
Right.
That's one of those informal kinds of support that we provide. We do an economic impact evaluation every couple of years. We use exactly the same methodology that the Commonwealth uses. So you'll see GE wants to expand, and the Commonwealth does an evaluation of the economic impact, and say the 100 jobs will produce X, Y, or Z. We use the same person actually on a contract on his own time. And a couple of years ago, our economic impact for the Commonwealth was about $700 million. And when you look at Campbellsville, Columbia, Pikeville, Pippa Passes, on, those are really important. You're a real important economic engine for this area. So that's probably more than you asked, but that's who we are.
And a lot of the private colleges, actually all of them, are pretty historic.
Yes,
They go way back.
Yes.
And they were established often to meet a need within that particular community.
Oftentimes to teach, the other thing I didn't talk about were our religious affiliations.
Right.
And a lot of times they were established initially to teach people to read so they could read the Bible. Midway, for example, started out as a orphanage for girls. And a development came. And I always tell people, if you drive around Kentucky in small towns and just notice the college streets. That's where they tried and they couldn't do it. It's not easy to do this. And so to establish an institution, our religious affiliations are still strong emotionally and philosophically and religiously, but they've changed a whole lot as far as support's concerned. And so if we were talking 50 years ago, we would be talking about the strength of the Methodist and the Baptist and the Catholic and Disciples and others, Presbyterians, and their commitment. The commitments are still there, but not the financing.
Right. Now, what are some of the trends among the IQ membership?
Well, a couple of things. I mentioned 20 years from 97 to about 2017, 16, 17. That was our commitment to bachelor's degrees. We've moved dramatically away from that in the Commonwealth, as most of your viewers probably know, to more of a workforce emphasis. Not that bachelor's degrees are not important, but more to the work level, much what you do in your technology program here. I would say, by the way, Campbellsville is very unique in that fact. The other thing is, so after 20 years, the bachelor's degree program, public and independent, have really leveled off and even declined a little bit statewide. However, graduate education has really grown. So our growth, particularly, well, really public and independent, are growing at the graduate level. And again, part of that's distance ed, but that's really where we grow. One of the other things I should have mentioned when you ask about IQ, because it's pretty unique for us in Kentucky, we have a very strong working relationship with public institutions. We've done some of that actively. For example, we made a change in the law a few years ago that directs us to do an annual report to the coordinating board, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, but it's really important for us to have that opportunity to sit with the Council on Post-Secondary Education, who licenses all of our institutions, to be able to tell them about our contributions. We also are members of what's called the Conference of Presidents. All the public presidents meet every month. My position was added to that, so I meet with them every month. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting, we meet early every month. That's very helpful.
Right.
So we have a seat at the table in ways We've had great success with legislative leaders in the education and appropriations world, which makes a big difference. So there's no question that all of you all do really good work, especially Campbellsville, but that doesn't help you if people don't know about it. I mean, particularly when it comes to financial aid, and oftentimes it's just, saying, well, that sounds really good, but think about independent colleges before you make that decision or this decision. So that's another aspect of us.
One of the misnomers about private higher education, particularly here in Kentucky, but really across the nation, is the notion that it is, the phrase I always fall back on is the bastion of the elite and the wealthy. In other words, only the elite and wealthy parents can send their children to a private nonprofit to colleges. Comment on that.
Yeah,
and the reality of that here in Kentucky, particularly.
Right. I always tell people one of the biggest fallacies is that rich kids go to private colleges. That might be the case somewhere, but not here.
Right.
And when we were talking about our array of institutions, we have a few institutions that are still very strong as just what we would call traditional liberal arts, the Centers, the Transylvanias, but they are strong, and they do sometimes deal with a higher level clientele economically. But in many ways, we are the open admission or opportunity colleges, not just in Kentucky, but across the country, which is totally different. We talked about financial aid a little bit. By far, the major provider of financial aid to our students are our members. You probably provide 3 or 4 times as much financial aid to your students as the state and federal government do, which we couldn't live without. So these are opportunity colleges around Kentucky, and that's typical around the country. Funny story, really quick. I had a legislator come to me and say, "A young woman from my hometown she's been admitted to Harvard, but her mom was a teacher. She didn't want to go that far away from home, and said, well, she wants to go to Center. Well, Center is going to help her, but they're not going to give her a full ride." I said, well, Center doesn't have billions of dollars to offer, and so that's, and why wouldn't a youngster that had a chance to go to Harvard? But so there's it was just he couldn't understand. Well, why didn't Center just give her a full ride? Harvard was doing it.
Right.
Well, we spread our funds over lots of students to try to help, and so that's a part of what we do.
Lindsey Wilson, Campbellsville, Cumberland's, and some of the other schools, we have a high percentage of first-generation students. Comment on that.
Absolutely.
First-generation college students.
Absolutely, and that's that part of that opportunity college, and it's also that even though Campbellsville is much larger than it used to be, much of that growth is in distance ed and graduate education. This is a family here, so when a youngster comes to Campbellsville, when I say a youngster, a freshman straight out of 18-year-old, somebody's going to know them. They're going to know where they are. They're going to know when they don't show up. They're going to know if they're having issues. I'm sure it's the case here at Campbellsville. A lot of places, students have a lot more psychological, sociological issues. If you look at your counseling centers, they're really growing in use. Students come from a much different, more varied background today, but it really is very, very valuable to have these more intimate campuses where we can keep up with people. I've been in meetings where somebody else say, "John, Sally Jones I haven't seen her in the last 2 or 3 days. Have you seen her?" And somebody will go find her and find out what's going on with her. Where you get lost at a big institution. And so the other thing I think that people don't realize is, for some of us older guys and gals, the environment of college today is so much different than it used to be. You walk in Campbellsville's cafeteria, and you've got 14 different choices. You live in great housing. I went to college, and there was 4 of us in a dorm room for 2. I had a chair for my freshman year for my closet. I mean, the only reason I say that is you have a fitness center. If you don't have a fitness center, so all that is very important, and it's part of that community spirit. You can do things here. You can be on a yearbook staff, or you can be in athletics, or you go to a big institution. That's very difficult to do.
And you made a very good point here on the main campus, the home campus, which is still the synergy and the center of the entire university system. but the size here on the main campus is relatively constant. A couple of thousand students, about half commuting, half living on the dorm, a little over half living in the dorm. Those are full-time undergraduate students. They don't count the certificate programs, the work-ready programs, or the online, or the students at our regional centers and our teaching sites, or our graduate programs, and so on. So that's an important point.
Absolutely.
You still have that small student-teacher ratio. You still have the ability to have a system where absences from class are reported, and personal interest in more mentoring and the same thing is true even in our graduate programs. They're small enough to have those kind of relationships, and certainly at our regional centers.
No question, and I think that's oftentimes lost in the translation. One of the areas where we suffer is, it's a blessing in many ways, but we don't have that coverage of athletic programs. We don't have 20,000 folks that are going to show up here. 18,000 that didn't go to school here, but they're going to be all excited about being here. I mean, it's more difficult for us to deliver our message, and so we really have to work at that and find our friends and people that understand what we do.
A few years ago, our mutual friend, Dr. C.B. Aiken in Lexington, who's African-American pastor, was a guest speaker here on campus, and he was at the time the vice chair of the University of Kentucky Board of Trustees. And he asked me how many student athletes we had here at Campbellsville. And at that point in time, we had a little over 700. And we would have a little more than that now. He made the comment that was more than the University of Kentucky had as far as students involved in intercollegiate athletic teams. Campbellsville had more than did UK. Now, we don't have the full rides that UK has, and the scholarship money. I mean, most of our student athletes are going to have 6 or 7 different sources of money to complete their package. But again, that student participation is such an important element among our IQ schools.
And that brings youngsters, the young folks, to college. They played football or they played basketball, and they want to continue that. And generally, athletes are your best students.
They are.
They're in an organization. The coach is going to make sure they study. They're going to keep them out of trouble usually. They're going to have a family. Same way with the band, the yearbook group, all those. So those are really important aspects of what we do.
One change that we have seen in the past year that is concerning at the state level, public policy-wise, is the change in teacher ed requirements. Comment on that.
Well, long story short, we will no longer be requiring a teacher to continue in the profession with a master's degree. We were one of the last states in the country. We felt like it was a really good requirement, but to require a master's degree, if you're or something that equates to a master's degree, to continue. We have classifications of teachers in Kentucky. We had one of the best systems, and we've lost 2 of the very important pieces of that system. For several years, we've had an intern program. So when you graduate as a teacher, you're basically a rank 3 teacher. For a year, you're in a mentoring relationship where somebody is working with you as a brand new teacher. No matter how much you learn in your program, you're going to run into issues in the classroom you never anticipated, even though you did student teaching. So for a year, you were in this teacher intern program, the so-called KTIP program. Well, we didn't fund that this year, so KTIP is gone. And then the other requirement was for sometime during the first 10 years of your teaching experience, you had to get your master's degree. And you had completed at least 2 courses within the first 5 years. Well, for a couple of 3 different reasons, there was some legislative interest between a few legislators to change that. One being concern about the cost. The argument was teachers marry teachers, then they have children, now they've got to pay for their masters. Well, I think that was overblown. It was that was the conventional wisdom, like, tuition's out of sight kind of conventional wisdom. And so that, plus when you start thinking about distance ed and the transferability of people, we're surrounded by 7 states. And so a teacher in Tennessee or a teacher in Cincinnati that wanted to come to Kentucky and teach ran into this problem, they'd have a master's degree. And so there was a lot of pressure around the edges, so to speak, of schools. And that was not a legislative requirement, that was a requirement of the Professional Standards Board. So the Professional Standards Board, under a tremendous amount of pressure, made that change. So going forward, we're reevaluating and reinventing ourselves at the graduate level. Now, a teacher's going to make several $1,000s more a year with a master's, and I think what will happen over time is more and more teachers will come back to that. But in the meantime, we're looking at how can we be more effective in the public schools, how can we help school districts with their professional development, how can we develop a system that helps mentor our teachers. When a Campbellsville graduates a teacher, as good as your program is, when you run into that student that's a problem or all the different issues that we face, you need to be able to go down the hall to somebody and say, you're my mentor, how do you deal with this? So
Yeah, I've heard some issues with the doing away with that program.
Yeah.
Some concerns among new teachers just this year.
and
That they don't have that mentoring
Right.
relationship now.
And you've got lots of teachers out there, good teachers, so we
Right.
need to find a way to connect that Campbellsville teacher who's an excellent teacher, been experienced, work with that Campbellsville graduate that's coming for the first year. And I think we'll get there.
Another change recently here in Kentucky has been the growth in dual credit enrollment. As you know, Campbellsville's been doing a fairly significant number of dual credit students for a number of years. But tell us about that and what has prompted that, what a dual credit class is, and the benefit.
Dual credit is the rage around the country, and part of it is related to cost. We might say a word about cost. As I mentioned, we are by far the major providers of financial aid. Very few students pay the full cost. Our tuition is reasonable if you compare it around the country, but nevertheless, there's that concern. And the other thing about dual credit is to encourage young people to say, when you're a junior or senior, you can do college work. And you ought to be, if you take a dual credit course and you get a decent grade, that's a Campbellsville course. And it counts dual credit, it counts both toward graduation from high school and toward coming to Campbellsville. Kentucky began going down this road several years ago, and we now have a full-blown dual credit program. There are a couple of issues with our program that are very difficult for public and independent institutions. Remember, we receive no public support, but the leadership in Kentucky, in their wisdom, have said that you can only charge 1/3 of the credit hour rate at the community college system to teach a dual credit course. So Campbellsville, who's teaching hundreds and hundreds of these courses, is doing that at a huge loss financially. You can't even teach courses at the community college rate, much less 1/3 of that rate, which is $56 a credit hour right now. So we partner a lot of times with qualified teachers in the public schools. And I think you're providing some compensation for them.
We are paying the teachers.
Yeah, that's
some schools are not.
Everybody is not.
No, we are.
But and it's an advantage for a teacher, I mean, to be able to be a dual credit teacher.
Right.
You have to have a master's degree, and back to that master's, and you have to have 18 hours in your subject field. So if I want to teach biology, I'm a biology teacher in the public schools, I can teach dual credit if I have those 18 hours and if I meet your qualifications. And so Campbellsville ranks about, well, you're by far the largest provider of dual credit among private colleges. And the latest data that I have from last year is you were ranked 4th or 5th from all colleges and community colleges in the state. Jefferson Community and Technical College, for example, is number 1, but look what Jefferson Community and Technical College is serving, the city of Louisville. So it's a huge benefit to the Commonwealth and a great contribution of Campbellsville and the others that offer dual credit.
And ultimately, it doesn't cost the student anything.
No, that's right, for 2 courses.
Okay.
And then they've now added the Work Ready Scholarship. There's also a real push to get more and more students into workforce training.
Define Work Ready.
Work Ready it's in 5 fields. I probably won't think of them all, but health professions, IT, business, those kinds of programs that are the idea being to prepare you to go right to work. And you can get you can take additional dual credit courses through the Work Ready Scholarship. After you utilized all your 2 courses, in junior and senior year, then you can take additional courses in Work Ready, but they have to be in these work areas. So students could graduate with a lot of college credit, because a lot of those Work Ready courses are going to be the basic courses, mathematics or other courses that you would take going either direction. You can also pay for additional dual credit courses, and you can only charge.
And a lot of students do.
You can only charge $56 a credit hour, so it's a great deal for a student.
It's a best deal in town, as they say.
Yeah, you can graduate with a year of college, and there's also a lot of focus now on making sure those are the basic courses. One of the concerns is, if you take all the, I mean, not just the basic courses, if you take a lot of courses, if you take all the basic courses, you wind up at Campbellsville, you've already completed your freshman year, but you've never been here, and so you're not taking English 101 anymore, you're taking a more advanced course, and that's causing some concern about your ability to succeed.
And I might add, from Campbellsville's standpoint, I can only speak for Campbellsville, but the requirements are the same. That faculty member, as you said, that local school teacher has to have the same minimal requirements that any faculty member on campus has, 18 hours and to be an instructor, as we would call them in our system here at Campbellsville. And so they have to meet SACS accrediting, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Commission on College, the SACS COC accrediting requirements for teachers, and also the syllabus has to be the same syllabus as the comparable course on the campus, the main campus. Because SACS will, when we do our 5-year review in another year, they're going to look at that. So we're a stickler about that.
Well, and the other issue is you have to monitor all of that. So the more courses you're offering, not only are you're doing that at a loss for the course, particularly if you're compensating the teachers, but then if you don't manage that properly and you don't assure that the students are being treated the same way as if they were on campus, then you will be in trouble. One of the issues that we've had that we've pretty well cleared up now was sort of blended courses where some people are in the course for dual credit and some weren't.
Right.
We being the Commonwealth, we've pretty much gotten away from that because that was really confusing for students.
We're down to under a minute.
Okay.
We've run out of time. Just real quickly, challenges facing higher education.
Perceptions is a big challenge.
Define that a little bit.
Well, that it's too expensive, that you can't really find a job. And a lot of that is an urban-rural divide. If you go to Louisville and you're sending a lot of students there, they're begging for graduates with bachelor's degree or more. That's one of the big challenges. Financial stability, just as we've talked about, you're providing a lot of financial support to students. You're offering dual credit. How are you managing all that from a financial perspective? And we're not for profit, but we're not for loss.
Right. Gary Cox, thank you so
Delighted.
much.
Good to
we
see
appreciate
you.
all the educational work you do.
That's right.
Not lobbying. He's not a lobbyist, contrary to what I said at the beginning.
Well, actually, I am a lobbyist because everybody in Kentucky has to register as a lobbyist.
There you go.
But
this is John Chowning with Gary Cox for the Association of Independent Colleges in Kentucky, thanking our audience for being with us for Dialogue on Public Issues.